Mixed martial arts legend Johnny Walker coming up this weekend. He's going to be challenging Anthony Lionheart Smith. Matt, this is a big-time matchup at light heavyweight. When you do look at it for the rankings, both guys in the top 15. Five is Anthony Smith, 7 is Johnny Walker, and I say Ireland's Johnny Walker, and if you look at it, he had John Kavanagh in his corner against Thiago Santos, and it was a bit of a nothing burger of a fight, but if you look at it since then, win over Yeon Kutsalaba by submission, who would have thought that? And his last time out, Paul Craig said, I've been training my boxing. Paul Craig catches a kick and holds on to it, and Johnny Walker just starts hitting him. The right cross lands, and then the back hammer fist, or the knockout blow for Johnny Walker. So Walker, he bounced around. He trained in Brazil. Then he went to the UK before he fought in the UFC. Then all of a sudden, he's out of TriStar Montreal, and then he's fighting out of SBG. He is a traveled man, 31. He married a woman in Ireland, so I consider him, and I have him on the screen as Irish, but the Brazilian-Irish fighter is Johnny Walker. He's going to be taking on a tough test in Anthony Smith, and Smith's last win was back in 2021. It was a main event slot against Ryan Spann. Ryan Spann picked him up, walked him across the cage, and Spann landed a good shot to start the fight, but then Spann started to hit what I'm going to call the Smith wall. And Matt, the Smith wall in that fight wasn't that. It was actually Smith landing like Johnny Walker. He was just winging punches, and when they started to land against Spann hit Beach Street, and that's where Smith was able to take over. Smith finishes him on the ground. Then he gets up, and then he says something to the effect of, where's my respect? And they had words, just like Merab Dvalishvili had with Sean O'Malley, UFC 288.
He took that coat, though.
But nobody took the Michael Jackson jacket. So when you look at a fight like this, Matt, for Anthony Smith, there's even certain fights, like his fight against Alexander Gustafsson, where he looks good early on, Gustafsson rallies with the striking, and even in the 4th round of the fight that he had against Gustafsson, which was in Sweden, John Gooden's saying that, Alexander Gustafsson, he has playful striking. And then all of a sudden, Anthony Smith's going out there, taking it down to the mat, getting the submission, and putting him out. So Smith's one of those guys that he's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. He has good striking. He has striking defense.
These guys are complete opposites. That's the thing. Like, Anthony Smith is just steady, right? He throws a lot of volume. He's going to be in your face, and he's willing to eat a shot to give his own shot. And he realizes that, hey, his numbers are going to be a lot higher than the majority of people's numbers for both of those, right? Like, he's going to get hit by a lot of clean shots. But you know what the other side of that is? You're going to eat a lot if you fight Anthony Smith. But for Johnny Walker, what does he do? That big burst, and then we'll see quite a bit of nothing. Like, the Thiago Santos fight was terrible. I have to say that. That's one of the worst fights you'll ever see, because Johnny Walker does struggle with guys who can kind of out-athleticism him, and that's a weird thing to say, because Walker is a wild athlete. You see the burst that he's able to have, the flying knees, the spinning back fists. He is a plus athlete, but when guys do have a kind of that extra gear to them, when they're able to take him down, when they're able to outpower him, they can have success, and that's why I have a hard time with this fight, because if Smith is in his face, using dirty boxing, throwing the elbows, Anthony Smith could win 30-27 without a doubt, and I think he could look a lot like he did in that Jimmy Crute fight. Remember how good he looked in the Crute fight? I know it ended via injury, and that might take away a little bit from the performance, but he was landing the jab, the leg kick. He was doing a really composed performance up until that point. But on the flip side, Johnny Walker's flying knee against Misha Cirkunov could easily land against Anthony Smith. Like, Anthony Smith is a little bit stiff with some of his defensive movements, and if he does get caught up against the cage, like what I thought the Smith wall was, if he gets caught like this, Johnny Walker is going to unload on him is the one thing that I do worry about.
And we've seen Smith do that, the fight that we reference all the time. Main event, UFC Moncton against Volkan Oezdemir.
But a lot of them, Jones?
Yeah, he withstood all the big pressure, and then all of a sudden he was able to unleash his shots, get it down to the mat, and get the submission win over Oezdemir. If you look at it for Johnny Walker, again, are we bringing all of the MMA together? And if you look at it for Walker, another camp out of SBG. He's won 2 straight. He's finished 2 straight. He gets them done quick. And that's the thing for Walker. He's 6-4 in the UFC, but he has so many first-round finish wins. And that is kind of the scary proposition when you're fighting a guy like Johnny Walker. And some of these fights, he will wait on the outside. He'll switch his stance. He'll throw a couple of leg kicks out there to feel it. And if you've ever watched an Anthony Smith fight, with the exception of the Crute one, he gets kicked in the leg a lot, and his knees blow up like balloons. So for Anthony Smith, he can struggle against the leg kicks. The move up to 205, definitely a great one for him in his career, because for Smith, the last time he got finished in a first round was 2013 in his UFC pit stop against Antonio Braga Nieto. He got finished in the first round there, then he fought with VFC, and he fought with, what else, Bellator. He went all over the place, but that was the last time he got finished in a first round fight years and years and years ago.
In a first round, he has been finished enough, though, to where I do think it is a concern, though. That's all I'm going to say. I know in a first round it has happened in a while.
Yeah, but one guy gets a ton of first round finishes there, Big Rig.
I know, no. My whole point is, though, for Anthony Smith, you're concerned about him eating a lot of those big shots from Johnny Walker is my own point. I don't know why he gets so defensive. It's just, for Walker, he has that big burst. I know he has a lot of first-round finishes, but since he isn't all that active, I don't think he is going to completely lose himself in that third round. I still think those bursts are going to be there, and that's why Smith has to be very consistent throughout this fight. I still think he can take his foot off the gas throughout a lot of this, because if he does, that's going to give Walker the chance to kind of re-energize himself and land that big burst.
And Smith, that tricky Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, you know he's got that in his back pocket. You've seen that from some of these submission wins that we mentioned in the past. The John Jones fight, could have won the title with that illegal knee, but it didn't happen. So for Smith, the other thing about title shots, Smith, you'll see it on Tapology, you'll see it on Wikipedia. In March, he was due to take on Jamal Hill. But don't get it twisted. He was supposed to take on Jamal Hill, and that would have been just the fight. That could have been a number one contenders fight. Hill got the short notice opportunity against Glover Teixeira and wins the belt, so Smith is just kind of left, and now he gets to fight Johnny Walker. So this could be a number one contenders fight. Obviously, Magomed Ankalaev's in the doghouse with Jan Blachowicz. That's how that Teixeira fight against Hill
and when's
got
Yuri
set
coming
up.
Back?
And when is Yuri coming back? So when you look at a matchup like this, basically pick 'em odds in the fight. Anthony Smith, again, his last fight was against Ankalaev, where he got finished a number of months ago. He hasn't fought in about a year. You look at the Tapology votes, Matt, I'm going to say over under 67.5% Johnny Walker.
I think they'll be over. I've been wrong on them all.
You're terrible. 731 total votes, 57% Walker, 85% by knockout for the 43% that have Smith. You got 29% by decision, 28% by submission, 39% by knockout. So they might not be perfect math there on Tapology, but the fans ever so slightly have Walker. Who do you have in the matchup?
I could see Anthony Smith getting a finish in round 1, 2, 3, or win a decision. Johnny Walker, it might be difficult for him to win a decision just because, again, the volume isn't necessarily there outside of a lot of the big bursts, and that's what I do worry about for him in this matchup. That's why I think Anthony Smith is going to have to be at, maybe not his most aggressive, but still really have one of those in-your-face kind of game plans so that Johnny Walker doesn't have the space to land his big shots. I still think Walker is going to land one of those big shots. I worry about Smith with some of the clinch because it's going to put him very close to Johnny Walker, and I know it might not be the biggest win on his resume, but remember when he did to Khalil Roundtree? Hit him with those really nice elbows on the tie clinch. I know it's a big part of Smith's game, but I do think Walker has the edge and the power in those ranges, and that's why I have Walker.
Well, it's weird. I mean, Anthony Smith can rally through some of these fights, but we saw it in the Teixeira fight, he wasn't able to do it. We saw it in the Rakic fight, he wasn't able to do it. That was kind of a nothing burger 3-round main event, and then his last time out when he took on Ankalaev, wasn't really able to establish it and get it going on the outside against a long, rangy guy. Johnny Walker, one of the longer, rangier guys you're ever going to find at light heavyweight, but sometimes the big bursts, they don't really equate to using that range all that well. So you got to kind of negate those stat advances that he has there. I like Walker with some of the big advantages, some of those big bursts, but this is a really tricky fight. So we want to hear from you down below in the comment section. Both of us going with the Irish-Brazilian, Johnny Walker, to get the win in the fight. The main event, it's Rozenstruik taking on Almeida. You are not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.